In this video, we are going to be analyzing what day of New York City had the most cruel summer weather this year. Obviously, you know where my reference came from. I'll just play it for a few seconds. Yes, it was a Taylor Swift reference the whole time. But in all seriousness, it's definitely not going to be January 4th, 2023. Although, look at that, 65 degrees in the middle of January. So instead, what we need to do is look at some of the hottest days of 2023, and you get this. I'm going to go over every 90-degree day. I also want to keep in mind, though, that there were some days that were awfully humid that were not 90 degrees. July 3rd is an example. July 29th is an example of those kinds of days. Not that I'm trying to go through everything, but so September 9th is one of those days, but I definitely want to get through all the really hot days in this video. But April 13th really wasn't that bad, despite being 90 degrees, according to the NWS, which is backed up on the Extreme Weather Watch blog. This source does put it up to 89, but they only track the hourly observations, so it's honestly appropriate. But what I wanted to look at is the dew point. Notice that the dew point was around 40 degrees all day. So that would factor in very nicely into making it feel more comfortable than it really is. It doesn't say exactly when the humidity is, though, that you gotta infer. Actually, no, it does, right here. And as you can see, when it was 89 degrees, the dew point was 40 and you had 18% humidity. Also, this is for LaGuardia Airport, I just realized, so we have to switch everything around to LaGuardia Airport, where the data is, of course, going to be different. So at LaGuardia, you only have being 89 on these days. Though I wonder why it's putting the low at 65. Oh, wait, no, New York City only got 67 a day. It makes sense. But nonetheless, we have no choice but to use LaGuardia for whatever reason. But when you look at a heat index calculator, you put in 89 as a temperature, but 40 as your dew point. The heat index goes down to 85 degrees. It goes down quite nicely because the humidity is so low. And when you put the day in as the 14th instead, you really don't see much changes. Arguably in this case, it only hits 88 and it's very sudden, though it does happen, and the dew point goes up slightly to 41. That puts the heat index down to 84. Assuming 89 degree air temperature, and you only jump up back up to 85 degrees. Really, it's not that bad. You do have to notice that there is direct sunlight, but it's still April, so the sun is not that strong. I will say that the wind being very little does factor negatively against doing a wet bulb calculator, essentially wet bulb globe calculator. Not that there are times to do that, but I figured out that on my trip to Iowa and that hell trip, even though a normal wet bulb calculator says it only hit 84 degrees, the wet bulb globe says it was 96 in direct sunlight and 88 in the shade, with a heat index of 118 degrees. That's the kind of stuff you be very careful of when you are analyzing wet bulbs. That if you don't have the wet bulb globe, you're not going to get the wet bulb temperatures that will actually kill you. But yeah, those wet bulbs can be lethal if you don't have access to AC. But we won't be able to go through them, especially on these kind of days. May was a dud, and June only had one day that's worth discussing, the 2nd. Now, the 2nd of June at LaGuardia Airport, it did hit 90 degrees. This website only said hit 89. Furthermore, it was actually somewhat humid. Now, the dew point average you're going to get is 55.8, with a high of 61 and a low of 47. Now, when it hit 88, it was actually at its lower point, though again, with the high being 61, and it's hard to exactly tell when it was 61. So it was probably sometime in the morning. It went down, but then it went back up to 59. I can't actually see where it was 61. 88 and 59, though, is not going to yield very encouraging results. You're going to get a heat index of 87.4 at that point. 89 and 58. If you plug that in, you're going to get a heat index of 87.9 now. Now, dew point at some point hit 61. Actually, there it is. It was when it was 78 degrees. I think that's when it was when everyone thought it was going to rain, but it really didn't rain that much. It was only 0.05 inches, but that's when the storms came in. But by that point, if it's 78 degrees, it won't really matter that much. Of course, the dew point low of 47 occurred shortly after that when the storms were rolling through, as it'll be pretty cool the next few days. There are the days of June that got annoying with the humidity, but because the heat and humidity never really coincided, I guess you could look at the 25th of June just to see what my point was. In now my area was actually a lot hotter and more humid. It was like 82 and felt like 87, whereas it was 86 and felt like 87 on the second. In this case, it kept down to 83. This website is actually saying only 81, but the humidity is a lot worse. So when it hits 81, you have a 69-degree dew point. That is going to make you feel like you're 84 degrees. And the dew point and the temperature got a lot worse. Actually, by the time we hit the dew point 72, it was still only in the 70s, but still. So July, we can't get through every single day. So I think that going to the second, third, and fifth are the most prudent. And yes, I am skipping the sixth because we don't have time for it. July 2nd, 2023, will hit 88 degrees, and there's actually quite a bit of rain. I think the rain mostly missed my area, but I think it came down to some extent, unlike the other days where it completely missed our area. Like July 3rd, where it hit the city pretty hard, but then, missed my area. The dew point did hit 74 during the day. Annoyingly, it hit 74 during the afternoon, when it was still in the 80s. And when it was 88, the dew point was 69. As a result, you're going to get a 93-degree heat index about. We took a walk that day. It was not fun, and it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. July 3rd, at camp, even worse. Now it's at 90 degrees, and we know what the dew point spot is going to be. Yeah, I mean, the dew point might have caved down to 97. I mean, to 67. Oh my god, 97 would be hell. Still felt like 93. If you have the if you have the 88-69 split, pretty much the same scenario. I mean, there was wind, but and it was cloudy, but it was so humid. I think it was due to isolated thunderstorms. This is why the city got more rain than we did. But it was so humid that it was really like it got unbearable. But the fifth, yes, LaGuardia might have hit 94, but notice there's no precipitation. It was in 90s for longer. I actually remember this day being a bit more comfortable than some of the others, just because of the lower humidity. When the temps hit 92, as an example, the dew point was down at 59. It only felt like 91 degrees. I remember I was looking at camp that day, and after the last day where I think my location clocked an 89 and felt like 96, I think I remember the next day it was like 92, but it only felt like 93 because of the low humidity. Or it was a very, very slight increase. So actually, that day be feeling slightly more comfortable. Although it was also sunnier. Next up, the 11th isn't worth discussing. Actually, the 11th might be interesting because even though, I remember that day it hit 89 because it was 60 in the morning, the humidity was pretty low. Though the heat index did crack into the 90s for a bit. The 12th, that low humidity begins to go away. This is saying 92. It actually at 93. So every single heat index that I'm giving you is a bit off, but because we don't know the dew points, we can't actually definitively say. So this is going to start off with a dew point of 50s. It's going to end with it in the 70s or in upper 60s. But when it mattered the most, it was 92. you actually only had a 57 degree dew point, which is going to make it feel like it's only like 90.6. But I want to draw your attention to a caveat. You have an 89-62 split. So as it was cooling off, the humidity was rapidly getting worse. It's going to feel like only it's a degree cooler. And then you have an 87-65 split as the night goes on. Again, you're going down, but only by a degree. You should be going down by more than this. Finally, 84 and 70 is the final split we're going to be discussing. Where at this point, if it's 84 and 70, again, you're barely going down. And I want to emphasize that point as to how it quickly got more miserable. So the 13th, when it hits 89 degrees, and I don't think it was quite as hot in my camp, but I don't want to. But I don't want to distract from the dew points, which is why I'm using LaGuardia as an example. You know, you're hitting 89. You're hitting 89 on a 72 degree dew point. And I remember personally at camp, you know, it didn't feel that horrible. But 89 and 72, that's going to combine for a 96 degree heat index. Now, at my camp personally, just personally for my camp, um, I'm on AccuWeather on my phone right now, looking at it, um, and looking at it, you know, it was actually only 87 at my camp, which is why I might not have noticed it as much, but it was just humidity hell at that point. So, yeah, that's that. Um, you know, July 17th is a day that we could discuss, and honestly, same for the 15th, because it just gets into humidity hell at this point. And this is the point they really want to emphasize. It's humidity hell. So, like, you're holding steady at 87, and you can see the high peak at 89. There's only a tiny bit of rain, but you know that means humidity. Look at the dew point. It's in the 70s all day. When it hit 87 degrees, the dew point was 73. And if it rose up to 89, we can only infer, you know, that's already a 94 degree heat index. Just plug 89 in, and you're up to a 97 degree heat index. And in best case scenario, the humidity down to 70, still 94.5. When it hit 89, it's hell. And, you know, considering the turn of the dew points, you can clearly say that wasn't the case. You know, it just got so bad. The 16th cooled down because it was pouring rain all day. But the 17th, in the aftermath of that, you know, still not a favorable scenario. And I think on the 16th, I remember my location where it hit 83. The city was shut down in 78, and they still felt like it was in the 80s. My location actually hit a heat index of 90 degrees just because of the storm semantics and how humid it got during the storm. And in this case, thankfully, you have falling dew points, so you don't actually have to discuss this. Thank God. And all of a sudden, when it gets to 82, you know, it goes up. That's the thing. Something in the afternoon will cave down, and because of that, it often caved down less on the island in the city. So when it was, but you also had an 89-69. So you still could have a 94 degree heat index at some point. But that's just a bit of an awkward trend, to be honest. The 18th had severe storms, but honestly, I could go through every single July day that had the scenario happen. It would take way too much time. So I'm gonna fast forward to the 27th, where I'm actually talking serious. Like, we were briefly under excessive heat warning for this kind of madness. You peak at 95 degrees. Somehow my suburb actually was only kept down to 88 that day, but the humidity was even worse. Now, you did have gusty winds gusting up to 31 miles an hour. That's a positive. There are very few positives. When it was 95 degrees, the dew point was 70. It was 70. It peaked at 74, though, again, that was earlier in the day. A 95-70 split, though. Let's see what happens when you plug that in. Oh my god, it's a 102 degree heat index. Yep, I was stuck working that day, and the wind was the only mitigating factor. And honestly, that wind is also why it was kept down at the 80s in my camp, and why LaGuardia did not hit triple digits. Because otherwise, triple digits was really on the table. My camp had a heat index of 98 degrees, however. And the 28th was even worse. That day, my camp hit 90 degrees, and you could see with the dew points, it was not going to be friendly. LaGuardia, they were kept down at 94 pretty nicely. But look at this steamy low. Their dew points, which, when they were at 93, they had a dew point that was somehow only 65. I remember this day actually not the humidity being lower than expected. So somehow the heat index was kept down to only 95.4. But I knew also to look at how bad it was when, you know, like 91.69 is something you have to look at. And that kind of a combination is going to get you up to 96.0. So it's tough. And it was also like not fun because then you have 88.73 as the night went on. And yes, the sun goes down, but that's also going to barely drop you. You're still going to route to 96. 29 is the day I want to discuss as well. LaGuardia hit 90 degrees, so did my suburb, and the humidity was unrelenting that day. It only went down when you had those afternoon severe thunderstorms. Um, so when it was 91 degrees, that dew point was 69 degrees. And again, that was just a case of where it happened to go down during the peak of the day. But I'm just trying to show you how hell like it was. I remember we were walking in Glen Cove. It was 91 and it felt like 97. It was horrible, and my friend almost died of dehydration. And as you can tell from this, the heat index, 96 degrees. Now, August, though, had no 90s. So, as far as I'm concerned, nothing to discuss. Normally, I'd say that you can't just say there's nothing to discuss at this juncture, and yes, there were some hot and humid days, but we have a busy September to talk about. Pretty much every single day from the 3rd to the 9th is going to need dissecting in September. And I also want to go briefly into what the fuck happened in October. September 3rd, it hits 89 degrees. Now, when it hits 89 degrees, the dew point is somehow 58 because the humidity trend is only going to go up in these days, which is actually going to drop the heat index down to 88. New York City looked at on this day. On the 4th, that lookout would not repeat. It actually was a bit cooler due to passing clouds. As you can see here, it only actually backs out 88. And according to the weather, extreme weather watching, it only hit 89 because this will only do hourly data. But 88.69. I would rather have 89.58 than 88.69, to be honest. That heat index number of 93, it's going to tell you why. September 5th was the first day of school, and it was certainly a lot hotter than what the first day of summer felt. It did hit 90 degrees. At LaGuardia, they actually flatly hit 90 and must have not actually rose to 91. And that dew point is pretty much around 70 degrees all day, such that when it actually hit 90 degrees, it felt like 69. I mean, the dew point was 69. Felt like 69, that would be quite nice. It actually felt like 94.6, which rounds to 95. September 6th was even worse. They hit 93 this day in LaGuardia. This is actually the hottest the average temps of the year in the city because we would stay at 93 on the 6th, and my suburb actually at 94 on this day. So you can imagine how bad it was. We would cool down to 93 on the 6th, on the 7th. But yeah, 92 degrees is what they're going to show you here. And the dew point of 68, which somehow is only that. These days actually are often cloudy in the morning just because of how humid it was at night. Anyway, 92 and 68. You plug that in, and it's a 96.5 degree heat index. And on these days in my location, it was closing in on triple digits. Because you have like 94 and 68. That's 98.7. Like my location, it was inching close. I think some of these days might have had 99 degree heat indexes. On September 7th, our weather station breaks when it's only 95? Well, that still gives us data to work with. A 95-67 split. It's going to feel like 99 degrees. Again, we were just inching on triple digits. The 8th, it was arguably the most humid day of them all. The city, 90, and I'm not sure if the 90 and 74 coincided. If they do, you get a 99.7 degree heat index. My allocation will just come down to 84. You got a 75 degree dew point. That's going to make you feel like 92. LaGuardia, they're showing only the afternoon, but you have an 89-73 split. It's going to feel like 97 degrees under those conditions. And the 9th, where we had a monster impact and it was 86 and it felt like 93. That's hell. Now, LaGuardia is someone only listed to be 86. I don't know how. And the dew point was 72. So you named that 2.2. You figure. And then from there, you could just tell with these kinds of days what you're going to get. And that's not going to be good. But we can't go through all of them. And I do want to briefly look into whatever happened on October 4th. Because that's like the last big day. And we saw these 84 degree days can sometimes make noise. Now on the 4th it didn't. I think in my location it peaked at 82 with a feels like of 85. But it could have been so much worse. With that kind of an October air mass. In any case, this is only going to show a peak of 83 degrees and a dew point of 63. So they're going to show it only being 84. Then you have an 81-65 split, which is going to actually be only 83. You don't really have that much, but it was still not fun.